Pre-rut and building up to the rut is super fun. We had a great time, as well as a lot of our pro staff. That season comes and goes. So what do you do right after the peak of the rut?
Unbelievable.
Let's take some time, as always, to talk facts here. Let's talk some deer biology, and then we're tie that into, based on what we know about deer biology, into a couple of hunting strategies. There are a lot of Midwestern states that don't have a firearm season until the peak of the rut or right after the peak of the rut. So these strategies can be really important to a lot of people, but even down south, those seasons are open from early on to, December, January, February. These observations are gonna help almost everyone out there. Pre-rut and going up to the peak of the rut is a lot about signposting and social communication, right? We've already talked about rubs and scrapes, and we'll have some links in the description for those. Of course, the peak of the rut, a lot of does are receptive, and they've been receptive now for quite some time. So once we get right past the peak of the rut, more than half or so of the does have been bred. There's a change in the need to communicate and what deer are communicating. Right during the peak of the rut, scrapes are pretty much abandoned. They'll be leafed in. There's no need to leave a signpost when a lot of the does you see are receptive. You just take off chasing. So scrape's gonna open back up. They're gonna be used. You may find a scrape that has a pattern of bucks using it, but that usage is probably not gonna peak out as high as during the pre-rut. Couple reasons why. Bucks have lost a lot of weight, probably fought, they've been whipped some, and a lot of bucks have been harvested, depending on what state you're in, so there's just not as much competition for the fewer does that are receptive. If you can think about that bell-shaped curve, that's a rut, and you knew of a rub line that developed early on between food and cover, and that food source is still valid. Maybe it's a standing bean field, or our food plots here at the proving grounds, or whatever it is, that may again be a great food cover travel corridor. But be careful, because if that was a travel corridor between a big cornfield or white oak acorns, and that cornfield's been harvested, or white oak acorns in a lot of areas are starting to rot or been consumed by now, that travel source between food and cover has probably changed. Speaking of food, well, that's a big priority for deer again after the peak of the rut. They've lost a lot of weight, and bucks and does are going food cover more. And the weather in a lot of places is colder. It takes more calories just to maintain the body each day. So food becomes a big priority for deer at this time of year. Food becomes such an important issue, and it's a little late for this, but you can plan next year. It's not a bad idea to make sure you've got plenty of food plots or well-managed native vegetation to make sure you've got plenty of food, but also some areas that you haven't put a lot of hunting pressure on, so deer are very comfortable going there. Just because deer are seeking food, if you've hunted your favorite food plot every day for 3 weeks in a row, I promise you, not many deer are going there except after daylight hours. You may be seeing some big groups of deer, and if you're doing your doe harvest at that time of year, be careful, because hopefully some does have been harvested by then, and you could see a big little, and that could be a larger male buck, a button buck, and a female fawn. And by that time, they've matured enough where there's a 10 or 15% difference in body size. So you're sitting there and big little walks out and you shoot the big, you may accidentally tag a button buck. I've been faked out by this portion of the season before. There's a couple more things. Those antlers can look a lot bigger if the buck's lost 30% of its body weight. And I've seen now, oh my gosh, look at the antlers, and they walk up there and you're going, not much of a body on that thing. So be careful, because if you put a 150-inch set of antlers on a key deer, it'd look like an elk, it'd look massive. So be careful making that judgment. Another thing to be cautious about, based on the same principle, bucks have lost a lot of weight, and I've had this, I remember as a buck we called the trash man. Pretty big buck on our property way back in the day at the proving grounds, and he ran out, and I should have recognized his rack, but the body was so small I had to ask the cameraman, are you sure that's a mature buck? I was asking the cameraman because the body looked so small. Well, made the shot, got down, put the hands on there, and it was clearly the trash man. We knew his antlers from a lot of trail camera pictures. He had just lost that much weight. So be careful going, oh my gosh, that can't be the buck I was after. That buck had a much bigger body. That's where using your Moultrie mobiles throughout the season lets you kind of get a pattern of those buck antlers, which may or may not help you, but a lot of times you say, oh yeah, that's that deer with the drop tine or split tine on the left side. Knowing the antler pattern can really help you quickly identify a deer as when you want to harvest or not that time of year.
Growing Deer is brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's. Also by Green Cover Food Plots, Winchester, PH Outdoors, Moultrie Mobile, Steel, Fleet Outdoor Apparel, Morel Targets, Fourth Arrow, Soil Pro Outdoors, Scorpion Venom Archery, Case IH Tractors, Burris Optics, G5 Broadheads, Prime Bows, and Redneck Hunting Blinds.
You may have got a new call during the rut but didn't fill your tag. Be careful using grunt calls or rattling, because again, that dominance hierarchy has been fought out, has changed a lot. Bucks have shifted parts of their home range. Some have been harvested or wounded from fighting. And deer know that a grunt call tends to mean there's a buck with a receptive doe, or fighting certainly means a fight going on. They may be a little scared to come into that because they've been whipped a time or two already. So I'm probably not rattling myself at that time of year after the peak of the rut. And I'm using a grunt call, I'm taking it with me, but I'm gonna see the buck and I'm gonna read his posture. I'm not just blind grunting. I'm gonna read the buck's posture. Does he still look aggressive? He's walking good, kind of looks like the bull of the woods. Or is he very cautious everywhere he goes? Or has he got an eye knocked out or something like that from fighting? I'm gonna be very careful when I'm using that grunt call. And again, I'm gonna see the deer, know the wind direction before I give it a toot. I mentioned earlier that there's been quite a bit of hunting pressure on most properties by the time we're right past the peak of the rut. Those deer are tuned up, right? They've got their guard on, their antennas up, so you need to really think about your approach, hunt, and exit, how you're getting in there without alerting deer. You want to be quiet and stand. A lot of leaves are off. You want to make sure your camo's working good. And this drives me nuts, we got full sets of camo except for our face and our hands. And you're on your phone, you're doing stuff. Those white things are just flashing all over the place. So a pair of gloves with cut off fingers or a face mask or a beard, whatever you got going on, a rough face like mine. You want to make sure that you've got good camo because you were probably nestled up in a tree with a bunch of leaves around it, and now you're sitting up there pretty bare. Some guys get a little frustrated right after the peak of the rut. Oh man, all the deer are gone, not so many deer, and they quit hunting for the season. Don't do that. If you've still got tags, get out there and enjoy it. Sometimes it seems there's a little lull right after the peak. It may just be as simple because GPS collars show deer still moving it. Man, they're scared. There's been a lot of hunting pressure, so they're hanging a little tighter during the daylight hours, or they got, nicked up a little bit, got wounded a little bit, fighting, whatever it is. But last year is a perfect example for us. My daughter Ray come home during the very last part of Missouri's firearm season, and we had a little extended season because we're in the CWD zone, and put her on a food plot. We hadn't been seeing much, and sure enough, a really nice deer come out. He was clearly coming to food. Come out of a cover area, went to food. She tagged that buck, made a great shot. So like we've been talking, once the majority of does have been bred, bucks get back on food cover pattern, and that food source was right next to cover. So he got there before dark. If he'd had to travel a quarter mile, a half mile to go from cover to food, she'd have probably never seen that buck and thought, gosh, Dad, hunting was pretty slow this afternoon. Travel corridors are always a big issue, but you gotta be careful because again, there's been a lot of hunting pressure usually, so that distance between food and cover can get pretty small, and you need to find pinch points that you can get in that shorter area to catch those deer on their feet. Another big factor thinking about that is there's less daylight. You have less minutes in a day of legal shooting light. So you gotta be close to the cover. Again, we do this all the time. We develop our cover about 75 yards or so from the food, so you got a good chance of seeing deer in daylight hours. If you're still working on that doe harvest quota for the property where you're hunting, be careful because some bucks, you might say that big body looks good. Some bucks will shed a little early if they get injured. Bucks that get injured have a drop in testosterone, kind of like you getting a big old gut punch. Oh my gosh. Dropped your testosterone level a little bit. When bucks drop their testosterone below a certain level, those antlers are coming off pretty quickly. So That's not a big thing, a small percentage thing. Just be careful, as always, really identify your target to make sure before you pull the trigger, you're aiming at what you want to tag. I want to share one last thing, and it's not a hunting technique per se, although it has a lot to do with hunting techniques. This week we're celebrating our 15th anniversary of Growing Deer. 15 years of making at least a new episode every week, 52 weeks out of the year with no repeats, and we've never missed a week. We owe that all to you guys and gals. You know, you've sponsored us by watching us, building up our viewership, all that stuff, and just want to take a moment for the entire Growing Deer team and say thank you so much for this incredible journey we've had for the past 15 years. When the leaves are off, it opens up a whole new view. Oftentimes I'm saying, oh my gosh, I didn't know that was over there. Or, I didn't realize I could get from here to there that easy. A more open view allows us to make better choices in everything we do in life. Well, that's the same thing about seeking the Creator's will for our life, because He has that eternal perspective on everything we do. And the best way we can navigate life is seek the Creator's will and apply it to our lives daily. Thanks for watching Growing Deer.